Hello, everybody. According to the printed leaflet, we are Thanasis Bantios and Phoebe Prosalika, but that's not true. So if you came for them, you can leave. We are Haris and Faye, very excited to be here with you today. We are both Scrum Masters at BIT and passionate about Agile. Before that, a common thing that we share together with Faye is that we were fellow students and friends at university that found each other again at BIT after 10 years. Let me introduce you to Faye a bit. She has a back-end engineering background. She's an advanced certified Scrum Master. She's currently Scrum Master of one of our product teams called Back to the Future, and she loves team building activities.
Thank you, Harry. Well, Haris has a QA engineering background. He's a certified Scrum professional, a Scrum Master at a team called the Rubber Ducks, and runs legendary Agile workshops.
So we're here with you today to share some of our experiences with scaling and how we balance growth in technical and business aspect. But just before that, let us tell you some things about BIT.
Well, BIT is a ride-sharing app operating at the moment, apart from Greece, also in Latin America, Peru, Chile, and Colombia. And there's certainly more to come. We face very strong competitors, and thus we have to deliver business value fast and of high quality. And in order to do that, we had to grow. So at the moment, we're facing a tremendous scaling challenge, which is transforming for the organization. In fact, in less than 2 years, we scaled from 100 people to over 350, almost half of them on our engineering department. We're talking here for a great growth rate, which is of course amazing and also very challenging. Because the question with scaling is how to scale. You see, when we increased our size, some bad practices emerged, such as hierarchical patterns and bureaucracy, which made us slow. Fortunately, we identified those early, and we decided to focus on practices that foster mastery, autonomy, and purpose for our teams. So we used stable, cross-functional, and self-organizing teams as the building blocks of our engineering department. The reason for this cross-functionality is because at BIT, we deliver business value in the form of features that require development from more than one engineering crafts. A typical team consists of a product owner, a Scrum Master, back-end, mobile, and QA engineers. This formation is driven by the backlog's nature. So such an autonomous team has everything the backlog needs in order to deliver features. So, Harry, can you show some of them?
Sure. The first example that I have for you today for an end-to-end feature delivery is the driver's night mode. When our new driver app was launched, we had feedback from our drivers that during night hours, intense colors and brightness of the screen was affecting their driving experience. So, in order for the dark theme to come to life, a cross-functional team consisted of designers, QA testers, back-end engineers, and mobile engineers needed to work on that. Another example is the rating on pickup screen. What we mean by that? We saw that we had only a very few percentage of rides rated by our passengers, and thus we could not deduct the passenger satisfaction. So, what we did is we enabled passengers to rate their drivers right after they open the app after the last ride. So this way we increased the engagement. Once again, a cross-functional team consisted of all necessary crafts needed to work on that. However, in order to deliver such cross-functional features, there are some challenges, and Faye is going to tell us about that.
Well, the challenge with cross-functional teams is how to maintain internal integrity on a certain technological domain. For example, on the iOS craft, how to handle technical debt or keep up with the latest technical trends when all iOS engineers are on different Scrum teams, having as their priority to deliver business value. So, we searched all over the Agile universe for how other Agile organizations approach scaling, and we got inspired by them. Also, we looked around for all the available scaling frameworks, such as Less, Safe, and Scrum at Scale. And we decided to start experimenting. So at the moment, the structure of our engineering department looks like this. The backbone of this structure is squads and chapters. You may have already heard these terms. They're commonly used. So, a cross-functional team on the vertical axis is focused on delivering business value. Each team member belongs to such a cross-functional team, while at the same time also belongs to another virtual team on the horizontal axis. These are the chapters. So a chapter consists of engineers of the same craft. For example, our notorious iOS and Android chapters. They are these guys, and some of them are here with us today. Come on, guys, say hello. Don't be shy. Well, usually they're collocated. So as you can see, each one of them belongs to a different team, but on the horizontal axis, they form the iOS and the Android chapter. Well, while the cross-functional teams, the squads, focus on delivering business value, a chapter is more technological oriented. But what does this really mean? Well, in our definition, a chapter is responsible for three major aspects. Internal integrity, meaning to use the same guidelines and keeping the bar high in terms of engineering practices. External influences, meaning to keep up with the latest technical trends. And finally, training and knowledge sharing among engineers of the same craft. Well, at BIT, a key part of this approach is the chapter leader. The chapter leader is a kind of a technical guru, pushing the technology forward and ensuring the best engineering practices. Also, another twist we introduced, which is very important for us, is the chapter meeting. The chapter meeting, it is scheduled for once per sprint, it is time-boxed, and it certainly has an agenda owned by the chapter leader himself. Well, the outcome of the chapter meetings is a separate chapter backlog maintained by the chapter and consisted of chapter tasks such as trainings and refactors. Well, this is the part where a big question arises, is how to incorporate this chapter time into our regular workflow. Well, I got you covered. Harris is the perfect guy to share some insights.
Thanks, Fay. So, as we said many times, Agile is all about experimenting. So our first experiment was more or less obvious, to incorporate chapter time within a sprint. As a rule of thumb, for a Scrum team within a sprint, a balance ratio between new features development and technical debt resolution is around 75 to 25%. So initially, we allocated the 25% of the chapter time within a sprint, focused in training, refactoring, and all those cool things that we said that the chapter does. After a while, we figured that this didn't work quite well. But why? And it's because of the challenges that a fully cross-functional team may confront. Because based on the team's backlog, one craft may have more chapter time than another. And let's have a look at these graphs as an example. So here is the team's capacity by craft after the pooling of work in a team sprint planning. So let's say that the team has pooled their cross-functional tasks, business-oriented, and here we can tell that this backlog is more back-end-oriented. This team has more back-end-oriented tasks because the capacity of the back-end is 95% covered, leaving just 5% for chapter time. Let's say that the gray area is the chapter time. Mobile has 55% coverage and then 45 free chapter time. Design 25, and then we see 100% covered for QA as everything has to be tested. So at this time, the team cannot pull more cross-functional business-oriented tasks as at least one chapter's capacity reaches the maximum, which equals the team's maximum. What we saw with that is that more engineers were working more on the cool stuff, new features development, etc., while others were working more on the normal housekeeping and refactoring. This was affecting a bit the team's engagement, as not all the engineers were contributing the same towards the sprint goal. On top of that, a big issue is that with only the 25% of the chapter time within sprint, bigger chapter tasks, such as introducing a new programming language, migrating to microservices, or replacing an old communications library, could not be completed within just a sprint. So in order to allocate those issues and find a way to resolve it, we were wondering what would be our next experiment in order to allocate chapter time more effectively. And we came up with the idea of gathering the 25% of the chapter time of each sprint for 4 consecutive sprints, and then allocate a whole sprint, the 100%, to one single sprint. And this is how the chapter sprint was born. So in the beginning, this was perceived as a revolutionary idea, as it was never done before, and we were the first kind of to try it. At least we never find something in the internet. So this, because after a few iterations, we saw that it was successful for us, and these are the successes that we are so happy to share with you today. So firstly, it's a way to address the normal housekeeping and refactoring of our code base, and thus makes us deliver business value faster, which after all, I think that this is why we're all here today, right? So, secondly, there was a chance for the engineers of the same craft to bond together and share knowledge and experience, as normally they are spread around the Scrum teams. Also for the chapter leader, it was an opportunity to better know his engineers and spread the best engineering practices. Of course, an obvious gain is knowledge sharing and training, and this is why we and the engineers love it when our onboarding process for new hires coincides with a chapter sprint. Of course, there are some challenges too. The first one, and most important, is that no product features are delivered during the chapter sprint. The second one is that chapter leaders need the whole mindset shift to act like the product owners of their chapter backlog, because it's basically a different craft. And last but not least, the relocation mess. God, eh? You may see all of our people wandering around our premises during the chapter sprint days, holding all the equipment, looking for their seat, or for their keyboard that is probably lost. And another guy has 2 keyboards, and another has no keyboard. But it's fine. So, to some of the details. The chapter sprint occurs every 5 sprints. So we run 4 regular sprints, and the 5th is a chapter 1. During the chapter sprint, the normal Scrum teams are dissolved, and new chapter teams are formed with the relevant relocation. The chapter team acts exactly like the Scrum team. It's co-located, autonomous, and run all the Scrum ceremonies. Which are, of course, first of all, chapter planning occurs the first day of the sprint. So the chapter leader there acts like the product owner, presenting to the team the chapter backlog. During the chapter sprint, all the engineers co-located by craft do their magic with code and stuff, you know. The last day of the sprint is dedicated to chapter planning, to chapter review, where the completed work is presented to everyone. And of course, at the end of the sprint, we run the chapter retrospective, where we inspect and adapt our experience. At BIT and at many other companies, gladly to hear that, We love retrospectives, so we get so much value out of them, and the people also. I can see one laughing out there, yes. So this is why we created a special retro kit that is handed out to all of you in the welcome bags that was shared yesterday. Of course, reaching to the end of the presentation, we wanted to share with you some of the success stories out of this chapter sprint. So the design chapter created our company's design system so that it's accessible to everyone. Aptly named Bit in Flux, as you can see here, which stands for in constant motion or in constant change. Our designers set the stage for a design system that contains UI components, iconography, generic principles, and other application-specific rules. Another success story is for the Android chapter that they introduced Kotlin. I'm sure that most of you are aware of it. It's Google's state-of-the-art programming language. So now that all tutorials, libraries, and guidelines are written into Kotlin, our Android app needs to be migrated from Java. So in order to do that, we needed a very strategical planning for such a big change. So this again happened during a chapter sprint. And the last one is for the backend chapter, where we created an internal tool, an interactive map that shows in real time all the location of the drivers. So here you can see an instance, which actually is the Lima city. In reality, this is way cooler because it moves and it has shiny lights and stuff. But we can see actually our rides and how our fleet is moving during these hours. So that's for the examples. And as we say in Bit, if you see our t-shirts and our logos and whatever, we say, where next? We don't know, because this is where we stand at the moment regarding the chapter sprint. And as we said, Agile is all about experimenting. Maybe next time that we meet, we have even more exciting things to share with you. So last word to Fay.
So I think the time is up. Thank you very much for being here, and feel free to visit our booth later for any discussions on scaling, the chapter sprint in particular, or anything else. Thanks again.
Thank you both for that amazing presentation, amazing team, and I'm sure we have a lot of questions, but we can only take 3. So shoot, who's first?
Hi, very interesting talk. I have 4 small questions. I can start, and if no time, we can continue to the next question. What does the QA chapter do in chapter sprint? The coders do code. The QA?
This is our biggest challenge, because what other chapters are creating somehow need to be tested, right? So during the chapter sprints that we ran, QAs did various things, such as moving to, because we are already doing automation testing, we are creating our MVP suite for that. So they contribute in automation, starting implementing some Java. We're using Java and stuff for the automation framework. So they gave some time to that. Then we had also some tutorials that we need to write. So they also contributed in that, because we're hiring like crazy. So new people need to have onboarding and know the business aspect of the app. So they created some tutorials because we found out that that moment was the perfect time to, the most valuable thing that we should do. So in general, about reading about QA technologies and the stuff that can improve the aircraft. And, well, we all want to have agile testing, but we know that this is not very instantaneous. So maybe the first or second day of the sprint, I don't know, this close, they can also still contribute doing their stuff while the other stuff are being developed, so they can test. And yes, we're thinking of using some rotative models for the QA chapter, but we are still experimenting on that.
Okay, if I may continue to the next question.
Next question.
Can I ask one more?
Sure. Can you speak up a little bit?
Okay. The refactor code, the end result of the chapter sprint, it must be tested. Do they have time to test it on the next sprint? When does it test? Or are you based on your automation tests to cover that? Thank you.
Well, this is one of the biggest challenges, and it is very strongly related to your previous question. I mean, it's a follow-up. Well, actually, we totally agree that everything needs to be tested, even if some people don't think that this is necessary. We try to incorporate QA, either manual or automated, into the regular chapter sprint. So at the moment, we're brainstorming on how to find our next experiment on that. So stay tuned.
Any more questions? We have one right here.
What are you doing when customer problems occur during chapter sprints? What are you doing?
Could you repeat what we are doing?
Yes.
Like
when customer issues occur during chapter sprints.
Okay. Well, of course, chapter sprint is something that we created in order to provide eventually business value. But if a business issue arises during chapter sprint, everyone is like firefighting on that. Just that. It's on high priority.
Actually, we treat customer problems or live issues during chapter sprint the same way we do in regular sprints. We evaluate how critical this is, and then we make decision on that.
So you
Hello.
guys are hiring, correct?
Thank you for
Yeah, we do.
One sec.
thank you for the nice presentation.
You're welcome.
I have a question. Did the product owners, did you have to convince them to allow for these chapter sprints or to restructure the work so that it is possible for just one sprint to allocate it to the chapters?
You know that these questions doesn't have a binary answer. It's a
Yeah, I
constant,
know.
it's a constant struggle, you know? So maybe sometimes they think that business value is way beyond everything. Everything is super urgent and stuff. So as a quote says, it's, if everything is urgent, nothing is. So yes, actually it's a constant battle, but we're having like constrained arguments. And maybe sometimes chapter sprint can be moved for a sprint. Let's say we do 5 sprints and then the 6th is a chapter 1. So things like that. So we kind of finding our way without fighting.
Thank you.
And my question was, you guys are hiring, so
Yep.
how can people hear about your job posts?
They're all over LinkedIn and our website and in our booth. Reach us.
And of course in the Woha app, how it's called? The Woha app, yes.
What are the next job posts up and running? What are the next job posts?
Everyone.
Everyone. Awesome. So if you guys are looking, these guys are hiring, amazing team. Do get in touch with them either today at their booth or online through their webpage. Do we have any more questions at the back before we wrap it up? We have one at the front.
Hi. Hello? Yes. Hi. Great talk, by the way. My question is that on a previous talk in this room, we heard that the teams should be consistent, and you should have dedicated teams under one department, etc., etc. When you do your subject, how do you tell them your sprints, your chapter sprints? Yes. Do you reuse the same people for each chapter, or you select different people each time from each team? And if you do that, what is the criteria of the selection each time? It's just a rotation, or based, or skill based, or whatever.
Well, both teams and chapters are stable. So every time the chapter sprint occurs, let's say all iOS developers, they construct the iOS chapter. So it is stable. We don't pick some of them. It's for all of them. And that's why during this sprint, we don't deliver direct business value, because everyone is working on their chapter team.
We can talk in our booth later if you want something more.
Thank you very much for that, guys.
Thank you.